Welcome to Sunny's Mindset Lab podcast. Today, we're exploring the compound effect with its author, Darren Hardy. This conversation is about understanding how small, consistent actions quietly shape our success, income, and life over time.
Thank you, Sunny. The compound effect was written to show that success isn't about big breakthroughs, but about the small choices we repeat every single day. It's really the operating system that's already running our lives, whether we know it or not.
That's a fantastic way to put it. I think for today, it would be great to walk through that operating system. Maybe we could start with the core principle itself, then dig into the power of our choices, how to build momentum from there, and finally, how we can actually accelerate our results. How does that sound?
That's the perfect roadmap. Let's do it.
Okay, great. So let's start at the very beginning. In a world that is completely obsessed with overnight success and get rich quick, your core principle feels, well, almost revolutionary in its simplicity. It's that idea of slow and steady.
It is. The compound effect is simply the principle of reaping huge rewards from a series of small, smart choices completed consistently over a long period of time. People are looking for the magic bullet, the one big thing. But the real magic is in the mundane, the small things you do every single day without fail. They're the things that don't look like they're making a difference at all in the moment.
That's the part I think people struggle with, that lack of immediate feedback. In the book, you give this perfect example of two friends, Scott and Brad, to illustrate this. Can you walk us through that?
Of course.
It's a simple scenario.
You have Scott, who decides to make a few tiny, positive changes. He starts reading 10 pages of a good book and cuts just 125 calories a day. On the other side, you have his friend Brad, who makes a couple of seemingly harmless, poor choices. He buys a new TV, starts watching some cooking shows, and adds about 125 calories a day, maybe a soda or a small dessert. On any given day, these choices are completely insignificant.
Right, nobody would notice. After a week or even a few months, their lives look identical.
Exactly. For 5, even 10 months, you can't see any real difference. This is where most people quit. They say, this isn't working. But the compound effect is always working. Around month 25, you start to see measurable differences. And by month 31, about 2.5 years in, the difference is shocking. Scott is trim and has read the equivalent of dozens of life-changing books. Brad is 33 pounds heavier. It's a 66-pound swing based on choices that seemed like nothing at the time.
That 66-pound swing is just staggering. And it really brings us to the next logical point, which is the incredible power of choice. Because that's all that separated them, right? Just a handful of tiny, daily decisions. That's it. Your life is an accumulation of all the choices you've made. Big or small, they all add up.
You have a quote in the book that I love. You make your choices, and then your choices make you. But you also point out a major problem that most of us aren't even aware we're making these choices. We're on autopilot.
We are. We're sleepwalking through our days, repeating the same patterns and habits we've developed over years. The vast majority of our behavior is unconscious. The first step to change is to stop sleepwalking.
So how do you do that? How do you wake up from that? It starts with taking 100% responsibility for everything in your life. No excuses. No blaming your boss, the traffic, the economy, or your upbringing. The moment you take total ownership, you gain the power to change anything. Until you do, you're a victim of circumstance.
Okay, so 100% responsibility is the mindset. But what's the actual tactic? How do you physically start to see these unconscious choices you're making every day?
It's almost deceptively simple. You track them. You track your behavior. If you want to fix your finances, you write down every single penny you spend. If you want to improve your health, you track every calorie you consume. The simple act of measuring brings it from the unconscious to the conscious. It's like turning on the lights. Suddenly, you can see what you're actually doing. All successful people are trackers.
That makes so much sense. Tracking makes you aware, which allows you to make better choices. And I assume, when you repeat those good choices over and over, they eventually become habits. That's the next stage, right?
That's exactly right. That's where you start to build what I call Big Mo, or momentum. So there's a formula here. It seems like it goes from a choice to a behavior to a habit, and then that habit, compounded, is what ultimately gets you to your goals.
Precisely. The habit is the autopilot for success. Once a behavior becomes a habit, it takes very little energy or willpower to continue it. The hard part is getting it started.
You have a great analogy for this in the book, the rocket ship.
Right. A space shuttle uses more fuel in the first few minutes of liftoff than it does for the rest of its entire trip around the Earth. Getting a new habit off the ground is the same. It takes a massive, upfront burst of energy to overcome inertia and your old patterns. But once you break free, once you build that momentum, it becomes much, much easier to maintain.
So what's the game plan for getting that rocket off the ground? Darren Hardy, it follows a clear path. 1. You make new choices that align with your goals. 2. You put those choices into action through new behaviors. 3. You repeat those positive actions over and over until they become a habit. 4. You build those habits into powerful daily routines. And 5. The most important step, you stay brutally consistent. That's how you get Big Mo on your side.
I love that idea of building routines, and you offer a fantastic strategy for consistency, which is to bookend your days.
Absolutely. The middle of your day is often chaotic and unpredictable. You get pulled in a dozen different directions, but you almost always have control over the first hour of your day and the last hour. If you create powerful, positive routines for your morning and evening, you guarantee you're starting strong and finishing strong. No matter what craziness happens in between, you're setting the tone for success.
That's such a practical tip. Okay, so we've made better choices, built them into habits, and created momentum. Now, how do we take it to the next level? How do we accelerate and really multiply the results?
This is where it gets really interesting. It's not about being twice as good or working twice as hard. The difference between good and great is tiny. I use the example of a PGA golfer. The number 1 golfer's average score might only be less than 0.5% better than the number 10 golfer's, but he earns more than twice the prize money. A tiny, tiny edge in performance creates a massive, disproportionate reward.
Wow. So the key isn't a giant leap. It's finding that tiny edge. How do we apply that in our own lives? You find it by going just a little bit further than you thought you could. When you finish your set at the gym, do one more rep. When you've made your quota of sales calls for the day, make one more call. When you think you're done, push just a little further. Do what's unexpected. That's where the competition quits. That small extra effort is where the compound curve really starts to accelerate upwards.
Darren, thank you for such a practical and grounding conversation. This discussion gives our listeners a clear understanding of how success is really built. It really all comes down to that first tiny step. It seems the question for everyone listening is, what is that one small, seemingly insignificant choice you can start tracking today to put the compound effect to work for you? Thank you, Sunny. I hope this conversation helps people realize how powerful their daily choices truly are. This has been Sunny's Mindset Lab. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.